something that is not making its way into the mainstream media, and they're doing it, I would almost assume that it's deliberate, is the psychopathic control grid. Now, that is an expression used by people like David Icke. It's something that I would be. It's a turn of phrase I would be reluctant to use, but I think a better term that I would be more inclined to use is the presence of psychopaths and the predominance of psychopaths in certain specific areas. John Carpenter in 1988 made a film called They Live. Even by the criteria of a science fiction film, it's not great, but it's not bad. And where it comes up and where it has merit is in its metaphor. The metaphor of They Live is the psychopathic control grid, and how there are two types of being in our society: the human beings and the others, or the soulless ones. And the other metaphor that Carpenter uses in the film is the black glasses. So the main character acquires a pair of black glasses. Those black glasses allow him to see the reality of the world rather than the manipulation that he had been led to believe. Breaking the psychopathic control grid in They Live involves breaking the mainstream media, and that's a very key and very important message in They Live. For myself, I realised on the 9th of February this year, 2020, that I would never run for election. And I also realised that the enemy, let's just take it from Ireland's point of view, the enemy in Ireland is the mainstream media. That is very much a thing that tinfoil hatters and new lads and all of those other ones have been saying for years. But that's a question, that's perhaps an example of the stopped clock sometimes getting it right. An awful lot of people who I continue to disagree with, whose methods and theories and ideas I still disagree with, are right in saying that the mainstream media is crooked and is our enemy. What the mainstream media refuses to talk about is the existence of the psychopath. When I was a child, and particularly a teenager in school, if I had known about psychopaths, it would have made, and how to deal with them, how to respond to psychopaths, it would have made my life a lot easier. I only really discovered the true nature of the psychopath in my late 30s and early 40s. I'm 46 now, I'm soon going to be 47. And that's something that I would have liked more of when I was younger. But I'm not to blame for that, because what is happening at a much larger scale level, both in Ireland and elsewhere, is that the human beings are realising about the psychopaths. One of the things that should be dawning on people at this stage is that the requirement to wear masks in shops, let's just take it from an Irish perspective, the requirement to wear a mask in a shop is a swizz and is a trick. And that's what it was intended as. It was intended, I believe, among other things, it was intended as a test. Because the night before it became mandatory to wear a mask in a shop, or allegedly mandatory to wear a mask in a shop, I made sure to get a copy of the actual legislation. And without going into too many details, the legislation is so poorly drafted and so ambiguous that it's not enforceable. That was deliberate. That was deliberate. You know, the Attorney General's office has, I assume, competent lawyers who are able to draft this kind of thing properly, because I've seen other statutory instruments that are not ambiguous. Now, I just want to take a break from that point and say that the freetards, all the free men on the land, are saying, it's a statutory instrument, it's not passed by the Oireachtas, it doesn't count common law, blah blah blah. Fuck off. A statutory instrument, unless it's challenged constitutionally, is law. It's legitimate law. There can be instances of ministerial overreach that came into the courts recently. We did see that recently in another matter. But you have to assume that a statutory instrument is enforceable law. So where the lawyers, where the people who know how the law works, go for it, is they look at it and try and find the loopholes. And there's so much ambiguity, leaving outside loopholes, so forgetting about loopholes. The statutory instrument is so incompetently drafted, it's not enforceable. So, for the first week of masks in shops, I was wondering how that would go down. And during that particular time, there were two instances in which customers in a supermarket accosted me for not wearing a mask. And I reflect upon it now, and I realise that I would have got angry about that 2 years ago. But I'm not angry at them for doing that because they're not humans. This gets back to the they live message. This thing with the masks in shops was a test to see who would rise up to it and who would fail. All the people who chose to wear masks failed. And it's a very, very sad thing that's happening to a lot of people, to an extent. But on the other hand, we're getting to see who our friends and enemies are. It was very beneficial. It was a litmus test for us. We could see who was going to wear a mask, who was going to buy into the bullshit, who would be the equivalent of propagating a yellow star in the ghetto, and who wouldn't. So, there is a cliche. Wisdom is healed pain. It's a bit of a bumper sticker, but it actually has a lot of truth. We're going through a difficult time for many people at the moment, but very important lessons are being learned by the people who are willing to learn lessons. And as for the people who aren't willing to learn lessons,